of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I will now call the roll for the committee members. Director Busick, I do not see, he may be still traveling, perhaps. Chair Davidson.
Here.
Vice Chair Geisinger.
Here.
Director Guzman.
I'm here.
Director Rosenthal is excused, and I was mentioning to Mr. Kroll that he will be unable to attend for the rest of the year, so we may consider a replacement for Director Rosenthal. Director Tisdale?
Present.
And I am Peggy Catlin, chair of this committee, and I am present. So for the record, we have 5 directors present and 2 absent. I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board office. Once again, at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Mr. Kroll, are there any hands raised for public comments?
Committee Chair Catlin, at this time, there are no hands raised.
And we have not received any emails either?
That is correct as well. No emails in advance of this meeting.
Okay, then, I will now close the public comment period for this meeting. There are 3 discussion items this morning. And the first item is for the general manager and CEO total compensation analysis results. Jack Kroll, executive manager of the board office, and Charlene Pileggi. Is Charlene here?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Okay, I see her name. Chief People Officer, will you please briefly introduce this item to the committee before handing things over to RKL to present?
Certainly, I'll just give a brief synopsis of where we're at and see if CPO Pileggi wants to add anything further. So back when you all agreed to the 7th Amendment to the term contract, you all committed to conducting a total compensation study. Then I worked with CPO Pileggi and procurement to dust off the solicitation from several years ago when you conducted a similar study. We pushed that out. RKL responded to a request for quotes and was identified as the best option. And so RKL, we entered into a contract with RKL in July to conduct a total compensation study. You've received several updates, one at your July meeting, one at your August meeting to this point on this process and this study. And they have produced the results of that, which was emailed to you all on Friday, August 30th, I believe. And at this point, they're going to present that and then take any questions that you all have. If you all choose to act on anything related to this compensation study, you could do so at your October meeting through a recommended action, but you are not obligated to do so. And with that, I'll see if CPO Pileggi has anything else to add before we hand it over to Lauren and Adley from RKL.
Hi, Charlene Pileggi, Chief People Officer. I do not have anything to add. Jack, you covered it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren and Adley?
Thank you, Director Catlin. Adley will lead today's discussion on the total compensation study.
Okay, good. Adley, the floor is yours.
Oh, looks like you're on mute and he's just looking to pull up the...
Sorry, I'm pulling up the presentation. I apologize. Try this again. Okay, there we go. Can you all see the title slide of the PowerPoint in the presentation view?
We can.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for attending the meeting. And today we'll be reviewing the results of the GM CEO total compensation analysis. Just to review some key points from a previous meeting, make sure everyone's on the same page. The key objectives of the study included establishing RTD's market competitiveness by comparing the GM CEO's compensation package with that of similar positions in both public and private sectors, targeting alignment with the 50th percentile of comparable entities. We also wanted to assess internal equity by evaluating the GM CEO's compensation in relation to other non-represented employees. And we submitted a report at the end of August and are now reviewing the findings with you all here on the 9th. Additionally, we wanted to identify and document the results from at least 10 comparator organizations. So, on to the findings. We're going to review the comparators first. So there were 14 respondents. We sent requests out to 23 public entities, 14 of which participated. This is a overall response rate for the public entities of 61%. We also reached out to 5 private entities, which we were unable to receive responses from. So overall, our response rate is 50%. Of the 14 entities that completed the survey, 11 were invited to participate, or 11 were invited to participate in the study performed by Gallagher last year. And of those, we assume that 5 actually participated in the Gallagher study based upon the report from last year. None of the private organizations responded. We made multiple phone calls and multiple email outreach attempts, but were unable to receive any information from the private sector. We have provided descriptive statistics as far as the comparators and some of the metrics we use to determine who good comparators would be. The number of direct employees, population served per square mile, and operating expenses per VOM, which is vehicle operated at maximum service, are all shown on this table here. And for the most part, RTD falls pretty close to the average for most of these. The exception would be population served per square mile, and that's largely because of how large your service area is relative to the population. Denver's a little different than some of the other comparators as far as the size of your system and the way your population is distributed. But it was within the range of comparators in the initial 23 that we reached out to. And then I also want to point out this table here. A majority of the comparators receive or reported that they receive federal government funding as the largest funding source of their operating budget, and only 7% directly generated most of their funding for their operating budget. The survey itself was broken out into 8 primary sections, which we'll be reviewing each one in the subsequent slides. So they were base salary, annual increases, compensation philosophy, which determines how an organization goes about determining compensation, the variable compensation provided to the GM CEO, and then benefits such as health, life, retirement, leave, and perks. Any questions before I move on? Okay. Oh. Director Catlin, do you have a question?
Yeah. No, I was just checking. There's a glare. I see that GM CEO Johnson's hand is raised, however.
Yes.
May I proceed, please?
Absolutely. I apologize.
Yes.
I didn't see.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. On page 4, I just had a question because I was looking at the data points that you have listed there. And if you could go back, thank you very kindly. The first indication in that top row says number of direct reports. And at RTD, it says 3,457. I just want to know where that number was generated because here at this agency, we do not have 3,457 full-time equivalents. And it doesn't really, it's not a factor in reference to what you guys are presenting, but for a point of clarification, I just want to ensure that the general populace has an understanding that that's not the appropriate figure in which we have in our 2024 budget as relates to full-time equivalents that are directly employed by the Regional Transportation District.
We can go ahead and verify those numbers and then make a correction to the report. Would that be all right, Adley?
I believe these numbers came from the Federal Transportation Database, so they would not be representative of the number for 2024. But we will verify that the number is correct moving forward. So thank you for pointing that out.
Oh, thank you very kindly for that clarification. Now I understand there could be. All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions from directors? Okay, Adley, you may proceed.
Okay. So looking at the overall results by category that we assessed, we found that GM CEO Johnson's current compensation package met the market midpoint for 5 out of the 8 sections, led the market in 1 category, and lagged the market in 2. And we're going to go through each one of these in the subsequent slides. Obviously, these, like on this slide, it's showing them as kind of equally weighted. For a total compensation package, things like base salary, annual increases are going to most likely matter more to the employee than some of the other ones. It has a much bigger impact in percentage of the total compensation. So although this shows them equally weighted, I do want to point that out, that several of them deserve higher consideration than others. So looking at the results of the base compensation, 13 out of the 14 comparators provided base compensation information for their CEO or a comparable position. In addition, we were able to track down the current base compensation for 4 additional public agencies from the approved comparators list. The reported base compensations were adjusted to account for differences in the cost of labor compared to Denver, Colorado. And this calculation was done prior to calculating the 25th, 50th, and 70th percentiles you see presented on the screen. When comparing GM CEO Johnson's current base compensation to each of these percentiles, you can see that her compensation is pretty much right on the 50th percentile of the market data. And this here would be current compensation, and this is the result of our survey, market 50th percentile. Additionally, GM CEO Johnson's pay range is a little bit wider than the base market 25th to 75th, so that's why you see this number as being a higher percentage and this number being a lower percentage, but it's pretty much spot on with the market. We also looked at comparators' compensation philosophy, and it was a pretty consistent feedback that we received. 13 out of the 14 comparators provided their target compensation philosophy for their CEO role and their general staff. 92% of respondents indicated that their target compensation philosophy does not change between the CEO and their other staff. And a majority of respondents indicated that they take an at-market approach, which aligns with RTD's current compensation philosophy. Looking at the base compensation range for the GM CEO role, the Top, the top of this table reflects what the current range is as adopted last October. If we use salary benchmarks, the results from our study, we pretty much get the same exact result as far as a recommended range. So, because of this, we do not recommend a change to the GM CEO's current range. We also recommend continuing the 75% range spread recommended by Gallagher. Any questions about anything I've covered since I last asked for questions?
I don't see any hands raised. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Looking at annual increases, so we collected feedback related to comparators' projected increase for the year. The majority of comparators provide a merit-based annual increase. This aligns with RTD's practices. Among the comparator organizations that extend annual increases to their CEO based on contractual stipulations or cost of living adjustments, the projected raises for the 2025 fiscal year are estimated to vary between 1.5% and 6%, with an average increase of 4%. A significant majority, 80% of the respondents who answered this question, reported that stakeholder feedback does not play a role in the board's deliberations concerning CEO compensation. Conversely, the remaining 20% acknowledged that while stakeholder feedback may indirectly influence the board's decision, it is not formally integrated in their evaluative criteria. So, taking this into consideration, RTD does appear to be pioneering in its approach of incorporating stakeholder input, utilizing the 360-degree performance assessment to inform the determination of the GM CEO's annual salary increases. Now, this inclusion of the stakeholder feedback may be particularly justified given that RTD is among the minority of agencies that rely predominantly on directly generated funding. This would underscore the importance of transparency and accountability in compensation decisions.
Are there any directors that have comments about that? Okay.
So, looking at additional elements of the total compensation, specifically variable compensation, when asked about the short-term incentive structure for their CEO, the majority of comparators responded they do not offer short-term incentives or annual bonus plans. This is where RTD may deviate from the majority of comparators, as the GM CEO may receive an incentive compensation one-time payment should certain goals be met. Okay. Now, moving on to health benefits. We requested information from each of the respondents regarding their health benefits and percentage paid by the employee versus the employer. And you can see that on this table. We have medical insurance, employee share, employer share, dental, and vision. Comparing these results to RTD, the GM CEO's share of medical, dental, and vision insurance, medical cost share is in line with peers. However, GM CEO Johnson's share of dental and vision premiums are higher than the peer average. So you can see here 30 and 70%. Whereas here in general for vision, it's 30% instead of 70%, and then dental is coming in around the teens instead of 30%. We also asked if the GM CEO is offered, or CEO is offered any other health benefits. 25% mentioned executive health programs beyond standard medical program. for additional physical screenings, health assessments, and preventative care. 42% offer their CEO wellness benefits, which could include things like gym memberships, nutritional counseling, stress management programs. GMCEO Johnson does not receive any additional health insurance benefit programs that differ from what other staff receive. Retirement. RTD's GMCEO is entitled to the defined contribution pension and the 457B deferred compensation plan sponsored by RTD as other salaried employees. And the 401A employer contribution is currently 9% of annual salary. This is in line with what we received back from the survey. As far as leave benefits, RTD does appear to allocate fewer sick days. However, it's important to have a caveat here. The variance is likely attributable to RTD's use of an extended illness bank rather than traditional sick days. Additionally, RTD does provide more vacation and PTO days than comparators on average. Moreover, RTD's holiday schedule is nearly on par with industry standards, offering only one fewer holiday when evaluating the combination of fixed and floating holidays. In comparison with total paid days off, the CEO the CEO of a peer organization would typically receive about 58 days. In contrast, the GMCEO of RTD is eligible for up to 66 paid days. Another note is that 54% of comparators have a vacation/PTO sellback that allows the CEO to sell back unused vacation or PTO from their agency. Maximum number of days eligible for sellback is 12 on average, where RTD is able to sell back 16 if approved. Okay, perks. When asked about other perks that may be awarded to their CEO, comparators responded with the following examples: vehicle allowance or providing a company car, an executive allowance, transit bus passes. On average, respondents reported an average of $10,000 additional compensation value in their perks. RTD's GMCEO is allocated $950 transit pass and a continuing education professional development budget of $5,200, which would provide a total value of $6,150. Any questions?
Are there any questions, directors? I actually do have a question, Adley. We have the transit pass, which is annual. Do other comparator groups extend that out for a lifetime? I mean, as RTD has the benefit of a transit pass for its directors for a lifetime, and that has that been monetized at all?
No, we did not. We did not monetize that. So that would be an extra consideration as far as an additional value provided to the GMCEO. We did not receive, in my recollection right now, specific feedback from any of the respondents as far as a value to any of their bus passes or a time frame, their transit passes. So it's possible that they are offering something similar, but they didn't necessarily report it that way.
Okay, and it was just a minor.
Yeah,
it's in the overall scheme of things. For me, it was a minor consideration, but I was just curious. I see GMCEO Johnson has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you very kindly, Madam Chair. Just for your edification and others that are assembled, it's traditional in the transit agency space that a transit pass is provided to all employees. Typically, a transit pass generally is for a lifetime once one retires and meets the requirements associated with retirement benefits. That has been the standard rule of thumb. I can't speak to specificity recognizing the peer agencies, but I do know about some of them. So I just wanted to add that anecdotally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I appreciate that. And again, it was just a minor point for which I was curious. Okay. Any other questions of directors? Director Lewis, please.
Yeah, I was just curious on the CEO wellness. Are there any statistics on how many employees actually take advantage of that? It seems like, it's a real sensitive subject, stress and maybe needing some help. The gym pass is, a little separate from that, but I'm just curious if there is any statistics on how many people actually take advantage of it, if offered to them.
We
Hadley?
did not collect, yeah, thank you, Director Lewis. We did not collect that information in this survey. So I don't want to speak to the prevalence of it in regards to how that might apply to RTD or not.
Thank you.
And I guess I would suggest that a lot of it depends on the individual coverage that insurance provides, because different policies have different programs available within their policies. I don't know how the specifics of those would stack up, but that's a good question, Director Lewis. We're getting a little bit more granular than I think RKL was asked to do here, but those are all considerations. All right, Adley, proceed.
I think these are all very good questions. So thank you for asking them. So providing an overall summary of what we reviewed. As far as breaking these out into three categories, where we have benefits that are to some extent lagging the market, benefits that are matching the market, and then benefits that are leading the market. There are several that appear to be lagging, such as dental insurance, vision, paid wellness days, vehicle allowance, executive allowance. Benefits that are matching the market are the majority of the benefits that we assessed: medical insurance, retirement, deferred compensation, paid holidays, including floating holidays, PTO sick time, and transit bus pass. And then the benefit leading market would be the PTO sellback option.
Are there
In
any
addition,
questions? Sorry. Okay, I don't see any questions.
Thank you, Director Catlin. In addition to asking respondents about their compensation and total compensation programs for their chief executive, we also did an internal equity assessment within RTD. So in this case, we were evaluating GM CEO's compensation relative to other non-represented RTD employees, specifically the GM CEO's direct reports. So Gallagher had prescribed a 20% differential between a supervisor's pay and a subordinate's pay. We at RKL recommend there be at least a 20% differential, but it's much more common to aim for 30 to 35%. We asked comparators to share their base compensation of their second and third highest paid employees to the CEO. When evaluating their responses, we found an average differential in pay between the comparator's CEO and their most senior direct reports was 75%. So the second and third highest paid employees on average were making 75% of what the CEO or chief executive was. The average differential in base pay between RTD's GM CEO and their top 2 or 3 most highly paid senior leaders is 70%. So it's close to range, slightly below. When comparing the top 7 highest paid senior direct reports, the differential becomes 65%. And we also assessed internal equity in a different method. Oh,
Director
Director,
Geisinger, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Director Geisinger. You're on mute.
Um, I think it was the slide before this I had a question on.
yes, I can go back to it. Wait, this one.
Yeah, I think that you said that the average differential in base pay between comparative CEO and their most senior direct reports was 75%. And I thought I heard you say that means they were making 75% of what the CEO was making.
Yes,
So
yes.
how does that follow the prior part that RKL recommends that there be at least a 20% differential, but it's more common to
Oh,
aim for around
Sorry,
30?
yeah. Yeah, sorry, it's looking at it the opposite way. I apologize for that confusion. But the 20% differential would represent 80%. So it should be like the direct reports should be making at most 80% of what the CEO is making.
And you recommend more
Or
like
less.
70, 65 or
Yeah.
70%, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I apologize for the confusion.
Okay, so then recommend 65 or 70%, and we're paying it 75%, just so I follow this all the way down. Average insurer 70%. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so the other way we looked at internal equity was assessing range penetration. So range penetration is defined where an employee is currently paid within their salary range. An employee who is paid at the minimum of their range will have a range penetration of 0%. An employee who is paid at the maximum will have a range penetration of 100. Typically, a person's range penetration may correspond with performance, could also correspond to years of experience in the role or brought to the role, and the ability to negotiate a starting rate. The GM CEO's pay range penetration is exactly 50% because she is paid at the midpoint of her range. Direct reports hired at the time of or since GM CEO's employment date, which was around mid-2020, have a range penetration from 72% to 104, with an average of 80%. Expanding this view to include all of GM CEO's direct reports, the penetration range for the direct reports ranges from 59% to 104%, with an average of 79. Are there any questions about these results?
Dr.
Dr. Geisinger.
So just those last two, it sounds like a separate range is set for direct reports. Have we done that?
Yeah, so each position or level of position has its own salary range, or like minimum, midpoint, and then maximum. So this is comparing where each employee is relative to that range and comparing those percentages. Does that answer your question?
Okay, it's in the job description. Okay, is that right?
Atley?
So we received this information from a census as far as the pay ranges. I'm not sure if they're also included in the job description or not for RTD.
If I might, Chief People Officer Charlene Pelleggi has her hand raised, and I was going to actually ask a question of her directly. But did we not just do a comprehensive examination of positions and descriptions and salary ranges within the agency?
Yes, thank you, Chair Catlin. So Charlene Pelleggi, Chief People Officer. Just with respect to all of our positions, excluding the GM and CEO, every position in
Oh,
our
you're breaking up a little bit.
Let me try again. Is this better?
It is for us here, so maybe the connection is
Right.
on your end, Director Catlin.
I'm being,
We
think-
can hear you, Charlene, loudly and clearly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
maybe. Shall I pause and let Chair Catlin or proceed?
I did not catch what you said, Ms. Pelleggi.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and call on Director Tisdale, but
I think it would be good to have Charlene share what she had to say, because I don't think she actually got to the substance of what she had to offer. She was just checking to make sure everyone could hear her. So it would be good to have her weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Okay, I thought she was still working with technology to get it sorted out. Go ahead.
Thank you. So every position at RTD has, we have a compensation structure. Every non-represented position within that compensation structure has a range with a min, a mid, and a maximum, similar to the GM and CEO range. We hire individuals into the range based on experience. So that explains the breadth of the range that you're seeing, the 59% to 104%. 104 is a singular anomaly, but essentially based on your years of experience and a direct experience in a role determines where you start within the band. Once you've started within the band, your initial salary, after that, you will then progress through the band based on merit. And it'll be based on performance. So we move people in the band in two ways. So that just explains the difference. If someone has 10 years of experience, they will start higher in the band than someone who has 2 years of experience.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may just have Ms. Pelleggi touch upon something else that's included in the slide that I think may be confusing as well.
Certainly.
Thank you very kindly for indulging me. So the point of the matter on this slide, it also says that the slide indicates salary ranges for direct reports range from 72% to 104% at the time of my hire, which was in mid-2020. The assessment that was done, to which Ms. Pelleggi has referenced relative to the appropriate bands, were actually conducted in 2021. So there's conflating of information there, and just wanted to qualify that. Ms. Pelleggi, would you agree with that statement that I've just put forward?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Director Tisdale, did you have a question?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just an observation, and that is that when talking about salary ranges, we as a board set the salary range for the general manager, CEO, and we have pegged the 50th percentile as the goal. We do not establish, nor do we select the ranges for all other employees. That's a function of the CEO. And so I think that as we look at the differential between the GM CEO range penetration at 50%, that's a board prescribed number, whereas the other numbers that you see are general manager CEO prescribed numbers. Just an observation. Thank you.
Thank you for that distinction. Ms. Pelleggi?
Thank you. If I could also add, the compensation philosophy as the board has approved for the GM and CEO under their purview was targeted at 50% of the market. As well, the compensation study that was commenced by GM Johnson that she was just referring to, also our compensation philosophy for all other positions is also targeted, for non-represented is targeted at the 50th percentile of the market as well, so that we can have some unison. The committee may recall when we were discussing the compensation philosophy for the GM and CEO, while Director Tisdale is 100% correct, that is purely the board's purview and what they targeted. From that, we wanted to make sure that the agency as well was also going lock and step, and that we didn't have an agency compensation philosophy that was incongruent, if you will, with the GM and CEO philosophy.
Thank you for that. Any other questions of Ms. Pelleggi? Okay,
Thank you all for bringing up those points, and I just want to reinforce that what CPO Pelleggi just mentioned is in line with what we received as the results in this survey, where there is the compensation philosophy that is applied to the GM CEO is also applied to other employees within the organization. Okay, so I've pretty much come to the end of the presentation here. And overall, the study's findings affirm that the current compensation for RTD's GM CEO is reasonable and competitive when benchmarked against similar positions in the market.
thank you, Adley. Are there any questions of directors? Before, I would like to make a few comments. I see Chair Davidson's hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. Helpful presentation, great report, and very much appreciate it. I'd like to just start by briefly thanking Chief People Officer Pelleggi for the recommendation to this committee to use Employment Cost Index in terms of aging our band last year, and thank the work of the committee. Last year and this year on that, we were 0.13% off by aging the band using Employment Cost Index. So feel really good about that call. And thank you to the committee and CPO Pelleggi. One question I just wanted to clarify, I believe it's clear in the report, and just given that it's summarized in the slides here, I just wanted to make sure for the sake of the record, I had this correct. When discussing the short-term incentive, you had noted in the report, on the RKL report, that is, that 57% of the respondents reported not having a short-term incentive. But then on the annual increase section, there were 63% that reported having a merit-based increase, annual base salary increase around 1.5 to 6%. One thing I know in the report, you noted the RTD comparisons, and I think perhaps our nomenclature was a little bit different in that our short-term incentive can be comprised of either, according to the contract, a one-time incentive bonus payment or an adjusted base salary increase or some combination of the two. It sounds like from the report, when you are comparing agencies within what we would consider that short-term incentive plan, it's kind of bifurcated in that this year, the adopted amendment we have in the general manager and CEO's contract has 0% allocated to a one-time incentive payment. It sounds like that's what would fall into your 57% short-term incentive definition, whereas there's a 1 to 7% adjusted base salary potential based on merit, which sounds like it would fall within the 63% merit-based. I just want to make sure that I've stated that correctly and accurately. I'm seeing some nodding, but if someone from RKL could just touch on that, I want to make sure that I've understood that comparison correctly.
Hadley?
I believe so. Lauren, do you have?
Yeah, thank you, Adley. Yes, thank you, Dr. Davidson, in clarifying that. That's correct. So in our report, an annual bonus or short-term incentive would have been a one-time payment of some sort and not an adjustment to the base compensation. That's reflected in in the percent increase of going back here. The majority, like merit-based increases, majority provide 63% provide merit-based. That's more akin to that comparison there. So your summary is accurate.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification. I thought I understood that, and there was, I think, then some helpful comparisons in terms of what's at discretion versus what's in the contract, and I think that helps us understand as we make decisions moving forward. So thank you for the report. Thank you for the clarification. Those are all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Davidson. Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I recognize that this review by RKL is not intended to be a proposal for any changes, but rather simply in line with the contractual obligation that we have to provide this review, to give us information that we can then separately act upon. Because I look at, for example, the various measures where we are at market, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then lagging market in 2 and above market in 1. Those again are simply observations for our consideration and potential future action, but it's information only. I hope I'm correct in that understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. I understood that as well. If I might make a few comments here, and Chair Davidson alluded to it. I would like to thank Chief People Officer Pelleggi, as well as the former chair of this performance committee, now Chair Davidson, for all the work that was done last year to get us to this point. And the total compensation philosophy that Ms. Pelleggi led us through and that we adopted last October, as well as where we landed in terms of base compensation. I look at this report and it really affirms the hard work that was done last year. And I think that we are in a really good and very defensible space right now. And to your point, Director Tisdale, this report is meeting the contractual obligation that we had, but also is really good information as we move forward. I just wanted to thank those two people in particular for arriving at that spot last October, because I think that this report pretty much affirms those actions. So that's all I had. Anything else on this matter? Vice Chair Geisinger, please.
Thanks so much. And I would echo all of those thanks. I think we're on a good path here. And I appreciate the good work here. I think it seems like a real sound compensation study. On going back to one of your slides, and I think I can refer to it if you don't want to put it back up, but page 15, it said 80% of the comparators took no stakeholder feedback towards the performance and compensation process. And the remainder, I think, said it was only indirectly brought in. What exactly is that referring to? Is that, you mentioned that the 360 was sort of blazing a new trail. Is that what that is referring to, that they don't ask stakeholders specific questions?
Adley?
Yeah, thank you, Director Geisinger. That is what the responses lead us to believe, yes, that it is not something that's directly factored in. Lauren.
Thanks. Thank you, Adley. I just wanted to chime in because I thought this was an interesting finding. And this question specifically, we added out of probably our curiosity more than anything else, just to get a better understanding of comparators' use of feedback in this process. And we thought you all might find it interesting as well. So, I mean, we weren't able to go back and interview the comparators to get a better understanding of what they meant here. So just want to make that noted to the group that we don't have any more detail on what they would mean by indirectly or not at all. Likely, I mean, there's some bias that may leak in any type of process of hearing stakeholder feedback. So we have to take what they say with a grain of salt when they say not at all as well. But we've, in making this leap, I guess, towards applying it to RTD, just thought it was an interesting finding that I would see the use of the 360 feedback in collecting data from stakeholders in a formal way as more directly collecting feedback to incorporate into the process than it seems other organizations have in any formal capacity, just based on the very little information that we were able to collect from their responses in the survey, if that provides any clarity.
Does that answer your question, Director Geisinger?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Not seeing any other hands raised on this agenda item. Ms. Johnson, do you have anything that you would like to add at this point before we move to the next discussion item?
No, I don't. Thank you very much for asking.
Okay. Our second item is the General Manager and CEO 360 Assessment Tool Project Check-in. So Jack Kroll, Executive Manager, Board Office, and Charlene Pelleggi, once again, Chief People Officer, would you briefly introduce this item to the committee? And then we will hand things over to RKL to present.
Great. Thank you, Director Catlin. And this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. So when you all approved the GM and CEO Performance Assessment Framework for 2024 in January, you all had contemplated conducting a 360 assessment as part of this process. As such, in the scope of work that I worked with CPO Pelleggi to pull together for the total compensation study, we also included requirements for the selected firm to conduct a 360 assessment, help you all design that, build that, and then conduct it. You all again have heard updates on this at your July meeting as well as your August meeting. And this is the next step in the process. You all were emailed you all were provided in the packet a sort of rough outline of where the 360 assessment tool stands. RKL is going to walk you through how they got to this point, some areas that they need your feedback, and then from a timeline perspective, this assessment tool will be finalized at your October meeting and then sent to the agreed upon raters shortly thereafter, and responses are due, I believe, on October 23rd or thereabouts. You'll then receive a report of this 360 assessment and the results at a performance committee meeting scheduled for November 18th. And with that, I'll see if CPO Pelleggi wants to add anything before we hand it over to Lauren and Adley.
Thank you, Jack. I do not have anything to add at this time. Thanks.
Great. Okay.
Okay, Lauren.
All right. Thank you, Director Catlin and Jack. I will share my screen. Sorry, everyone. Technology this morning. Okay. Let me just make this presenter. Can everyone see the presenter mode?
We can now see in full screen. Oh, you had it correct.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I apologize, everyone. We'll get this right. All right. How's it looking now?
It's great.
Okay, beautiful. So to round out RKL's report for today's meeting, I will be presenting on an update of the GM and CEO's annual 360 performance assessment tool. For the record, my name is Lauren Stricker. I am a senior analyst with the workforce strategies team at RKL Virtual Management Solutions. As you are all aware or likely aware, RKL was engaged to assist the performance committee in designing and conducting a custom 360-degree annual performance assessment. As part of this process, our team was to assist with identifying assessment raters and key assessment components. Additionally, we were to develop a list of assessment items for your review and comment. Once finalized, we will distribute the 360-degree assessment, collect responses, and report on those responses, as Jack noted in his summary. Additionally, we will be developing a performance assessment tool to be used by the board to evaluate GM and CEO's performance. We will be distributing this survey to all board members, and again, we'll collect responses and provide a report back. The target deadline to have the 360-degree report results to the board office is October 31st, 2024. And the presentation deadline, as Jack noted, has been pushed back to November 18th, 2024, just to accommodate schedules. And you should have a detailed project plan enclosed in the committee meeting packet that lists out the tasks to conduct this project and the timeline for each task. Okay. In our effort to identify the key assessment components for the 360 assessment tool and to develop the items that represent each of those components, we had a few steps in our process to collect the necessary information to accomplish this task. In order to do that, we did review the GM and CEO's job description, and as well as interview the GM and CEO to understand, her goals for the 360, the most important components that should be reflected in the 360 assessment, and how her goals may be incorporated in that assessment. Additionally, we interviewed each one of the performance committee directors to get an understanding of the most important components that you believe should be included in the 360-degree assessment, and how they should show up basically in that amount in the final tool. We also reviewed the organization's values and goals in order to deliver what you have in the performance committee meeting packet today, which is reflecting of performance categories, components, and assessment items, which I'll be going into greater detail through this presentation. We additionally, after interviewing performance committee directors, we did send out a short survey to all of the board of directors to basically ask the same questions that we had asked during the interviews with performance committee members. The goal of this very short survey was to get a better understanding of the greater board's perspective of what should be included in the 360-degree assessment, or what items should be evaluated in the 360. We did receive it was 8 responses through that survey, and we aggregated the results to better understand what should be the most important things to be evaluated. Again, all of this information was used to develop the items that you were presented in the committee meeting packet. Any questions so far?
I don't see any, Lauren. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Catlin. Okay, the information that we collected through these various avenues, we hoped to translate into the 360 assessment tool and items that we proposed to you. We have organized those items in a framework that should look similar to should look familiar to you, and that includes the framework that you have approved, and there's 3 performance categories that the 360 assessment were to evaluate, basically. And that's general transit management, internal relationships, second being board interaction, and third being external relationships. So in your enclosed meeting packets, you should have received the draft list of components and items. Each one of the components and items have been assigned to one of those 3 performance categories that I have up on the screen in the orange box. I'm going to walk through how each one of the components are organized, or what you should be expecting to see in your performance committee packets. So the first I should back up probably for the purpose of this presentation. When I state performance category, I do intend to indicate the 3 performance categories that I've listed here. So these are broader categories aligning with general transit management, internal relationships, second board interaction, and external relationships. And when I say components, I really mean subcategories of those larger performance categories. So first performance category being general transit management, internal relationships. We recommend the 360 assessment assess these components, these 5 components under that performance category. So those 5 components are financial leadership, organizational culture and people management, strategic leadership and innovation, developing others, and engaging leadership. Now, those are large components, and there are specific assessment items or questions that have been associated with each one of those components, and you'll have those in your packets. The second performance category is board interaction. We've recommended 3 components to evaluate in the 360. That's board engagement and advocacy, strategic communication and information management, and strategic governance and collaboration. The final performance category is external relationships. We've recommended 3 components to evaluate in the 360. That's collaboration, communication, and relationship building. Now, before I move on to the rating scale, I just want to note a few things. There should be a maximum of 49 assessment items that may be presented to one rater group in total. The number of assessment items that we are recommending vary by rater category, and the rater categories are direct reports, board members, and stakeholders, and self-evaluation. So the GM and CEO would complete a self-evaluation. The reason that there is varying number of items that could be presented through the 360 as we proposed is because we felt that there were some assessment items that were not best evaluated by a certain group. So, for example, it's likely that an external stakeholder couldn't or may not have all of the information necessary to evaluate whether RTD's recruiting practices or how the GM and CEO handles internal communications. And so in some cases, we have blacked out in the presentation that you received or provided an X next to which raters would receive which items. And in those cases, external stakeholders wouldn't receive those items.
I'm going to pause right here. I do see Director Lewis has his hand raised. This is a pretty complex matrix, and I'm not sure if all directors have had a chance to really study it carefully, but we do have some time, as Mr. Kroll pointed out, to finalize these prior to proceeding with the 360 process. Director Lewis, please.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with the word engaging leadership. I'm not sure if that means developing leadership for others or demonstrating leadership for the position. So engaging seems to be have a little bit ambiguity there.
Lauren?
Engaging leadership under general transit management and internal relationships. Just to clarify, is that
what you meant?
I'm just confused whether it's demonstrating leadership for the person stated, or are they developing leadership for others? Because that's part of the job, is developing the employees under the GEM CEO. So like I said, I'm just not sure which direction that engagement means. So it's just a comment. You don't have to answer it now, but it just seems a little.
I believe maybe you got cut off at the end, but I'd be happy just to comment quickly on that. So we have 2 separate items under general transit management internal relationships, one being development of others, so developing others, and the other engaging leadership. Any items that refer to the GM and CEO's responsibility of providing developmental opportunities, training opportunities, encouraging growth in her direct reports, those items would be allocated to developing others rather than engaging leadership. Engaging leadership is more of driving mission and vision in a more general sense of the role.
Thank you. That answers my question. Absolutely.
And I will be noting this later on in the presentation. We do hope to receive feedback, specific feedback on the assessment items, and the components that we are proposing from the group, from the committee, as well as GM and CEO Johnson. We're looking forward to that feedback. We certainly want to give you enough time to evaluate everything. As Chair Catlin mentioned, the matrix is fairly complicated. So that being said, we don't necessarily, want or believe that you'll have suggestions necessarily specific to the assessment items or the components. However, if there's any questions or comments on the structure, generally speaking, we can certainly talk about that today, but I do want to make sure everyone has the time to really evaluate the matrix and the assessment items that we're proposing. And so, again, I'll be talking about this later, but we're hoping to receive feedback from the group by the 17th on any specific comments or suggestions on the proposed here. So please don't feel that you need to have evaluated this thoroughly for today's presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. And just, you mentioned time. We have a time check here, and I know that there are some people that have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. It's now 9:38. So since we have an opportunity to provide input and questions up to the 17th, I'd suggest that we move forward with this and reserve some of those detailed questions for later. Thank you. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Chair Catlin. Just a few quick notes here again on the questions. There will be 2 open-ended questions at the end of the assessment. Those should be included in the packet. They're just 2 general questions related to asking about the strengths of the current GM and CEO and what opportunities for growth there may be. The rest of the assessment items will be assessed on a 7-point Likert scale. We opted to propose a 7-point Likert scale rather than a 5-point Likert scale to provide more precise information about rater sentiments. The 7-point rating scale that we are proposing goes from 1 very poor to 7 outstanding. And again, though this scale would be used for all assessment items that you see in that matrix outside of the 2 open-ended items at the very bottom, likely of that portion of your packet. Just circling back to our conversation from the last performance committee meeting on identifying raters, the direct reports, we have identified 3 rater groups: direct reports, board of directors, and peers and stakeholders. We will be randomly selecting 5 direct reports from all of those that report into GM and CEO Johnson. We'll be randomly selecting that on a meeting with all parties or representatives of RKL and RTD present. Board of directors, for the selection of the board of directors, the board chair and performance committee chair will select 3 board of directors to serve as raters in this process. And peers and stakeholders, GM and CEO Johnson kindly offered recommendations for who she believes to be the best of the stakeholders to be included in this process. We recommend that we select 4. She recommended more than 4 on the list, which she received. Following performance committee review and comments, should you have any conclusions or suggestions or alterations to that list, we would again randomly select from that final list with all parties present or representatives of RKL and RTD present. Any questions there?
Directors, do you have any questions about this? I think there is a desire among some directors to have an opportunity to provide input into that 3rd category. And I would suggest if directors are okay with how the other directors are selected or appointed, I would ask that from the board at large, any directors who feel they could not commit the time or do not want to have the opportunity to provide input into the 360 process, please let me or Chair Davidson know that you would not be available to do that. So if you're comfortable with the chair and I providing recommendations, then please go ahead. I see Director Guzman has his hand raised.
Sorry, I totally agree with you, Chair Catlin. Just wanted to put this out again one more time for everybody's understanding. This 360 evaluation, to my understanding, as we have discussed it so far in this committee, does not supplant our final review as directors and our responsibility to our employee to do our job, which is to meet the agreement of reviewing her at the end of the year. The contract stipulates that, and that is a responsibility of the board separate from this. This is
That's
to inform us. And so I just want to make sure that we are all clear that that's the direction we're moving in. But this is a step to get to that final stage where we can get information that we have been looking for over the last couple of years that we may be missing to better inform our work as directors, separate and apart from doing our own review of the general manager CEO position at RTD. And I'm trying to be agnostic of the individual and stick to the role because that's the important piece here. But this 360 feedback will be specifically about Deborah Johnson, our current GM CEO. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you for that. Again, should anyone not feel that they can participate in the 360, please let us know. And then also, if directors have some ideas or suggestions for additional candidates for peers and stakeholders, please also let board manager Kroll know or myself. Thank you. Director Guzman, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else to add? Okay. I see GM CEO Johnson has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. In reference to additional input relative to stakeholders, I would encourage you all to ensure that there are raters that have sufficient experience working with me as the participant to provide valid responses, because there are tips that are quite valuable in helping to ascertain who might be ideal as we go forward, because they should have an understanding and should have engaged with me on a myriad of different matters and have an understanding of how I show up. I do know that there has been other suggestions put forward that weren't necessarily optimal due to the fact that they're regulators and things of the like. That's why I'm providing that additional input. And I would assume going forward that I would have an understanding of who those additional parties were, recognizing that some may not know who I engage with on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Duly noted. Any other comments? Okay, Lauren, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Catlin. We're almost at the end here. I know I want to be cognizant of time. As I mentioned, we are hoping to receive feedback from the group, from the committee, as well as GM and CEO Johnson. The specific areas of feedback that we're hoping to receive include the appropriateness of the performance subcategories, which we're referring to as components, as well as the individual assessment items assigned to those components. So we would love to hear your feedback on clarity and relevance, just as a general guideline or any other feedback as well. In addition, any feedback related to the rating scale or questions or concerns related to any of those items. And finally, rater selection, as we just discussed, if there's any additions to or changes or modifications, questions, concerns related to the third point, which is the stakeholder list, or how we are assessing or selecting the raters, please feel free to provide those to Jack by September 17th. We asked by September 17th so that our team has enough time to make those changes to the 360 assessment tool prior to the October Performance Committee meeting, which we are set to present the final 360 assessment during that time. just as a quick overview on next steps here, we reviewed a lot of these items as far as what we have done to get to where we are. But just to reiterate again, today we are presenting the draft version of the assessment items, and the October 7th meeting, I believe it's the 7th, we would be presenting the final 360. So again, if you could provide feedback by this September 17th, that would give us enough time to make any changes. We would then be set to distribute the 360 assessment following the next committee meeting on the 9th and close the assessment on the 23rd. So that gives us enough time again to analyze the results and provide a report by the end of October. Any final question on this topic?
I do not see any hands raised. Thank you, Lauren. Again, the 17th, keep that in mind. The earlier, the better. We appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Kroll, I see your hand is raised.
Just real quickly, just to say that I will send out an email with the packet for today's meeting attached, a link to the packet, as well as an Excel sheet that has the questions, draft questions for the 360 to everyone, including GM and CEO Johnson, and you can respond to that email with your feedback by the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Okay, the third and final item is for the community and paratransit surveys. John McKay, Executive Business Partner, will you please present this item?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am John McKay, Executive Business Partner. Just for context, these are the annual surveys that we do in relation to the community and paratransit customers. These are in relation to the strategic plan with respect to community value and customer excellence. These are not related to the paratransit peer review that was just conducted recently. So I just wanted to provide that for context. With us here is the CEO of ETC Institute, Chris Tatham. He's going to be presenting the information related to the surveys. ETC is our contracted third-party survey provider, and they had teams out over the course of the last couple weeks of August for the customer surveys related to bus and rail. We'll be presenting those at the next performance committee meeting, or sorry, the following performance committee meeting in October. For this part, we're just going over the paratransit and community portions of the survey. And with that, I will hand it over to Chris, and he will be presenting.
Great. It's great to be with everyone today. I'm going to pull up my screen, see if I can get it shared for everyone. So, all right. Are you able to see that, everyone? Great.
We can, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay, let me put it up. Thanks. All right. They get timed out on me. So here we go. How's that? Is that better?
It is.
Okay, great. Well, anyway, I'm going to walk you through, as John mentioned, our firm actually specializes in doing research for local governments around the country. We actually do surveys for 33 of the 50 largest transit organizations in the United States and more than 1,000 city and counties. And as part of the work that we do, we develop benchmarks so that organizations can see how do they compare against true national averages. And so I'm going to share with you a few of those benchmarks today, and they're based on a national survey that we do each year, more than 4,000 U.S. residents. So it's not just the average of the places we've done survey, it's truly a national average. So today I'm going to share the results of the community and the paratransit surveys. These were both done, as John mentioned, over the summer. I'm going to walk you through the community value survey first, which is really to better understand what does the community think, what are their views of RTD, what's important to them. And that includes most of the people who aren't frequent users, but to make sure that they understand, well, what would they think RTD should or shouldn't do, and are their views generally positive, or if they're becoming more negative, why? And then we're also going to share the results of the paratransit surveys today, and I'll walk you through some of the details of each as we go through them. So just for, if you're new to this, as far as kind of an introduction, some of the big takeaways this year are very good. Overall satisfaction has increased, both surveys, and I think that's really encouraging. And that's happened in an era when things are still generally getting worse for most other communities. Your net promoter increased. If you're not familiar with that, I'll walk you through what that is. We did identify that paratransit travel times becoming a bigger issue to paratransit users, and I'll walk you through how we got there. And the number one thing to the community at large for transit still remains making sure that transit can provide access to employment for people. So that hasn't changed a lot. But all in all, the results are very good this year. The community value and the customer excellence survey for paratransit were conducted in June and July. The rail and the bus customer excellence surveys were just completed. And so those results, as John mentioned, will be available in October. We're actually also doing your origin and destination survey for your travel model and planning, and that's actually going on. So if you run into somebody doing a survey, that's what that survey is. So let me start off with the community value survey. This survey is conducted between June 19th and July 12th. We mail a survey to a random sample of households in the Denver region. We then follow up with email and text to maximize the response rate. We're actually targeting to get at least 400 completes. We actually had 629 complete the survey. And when you look at the demographic distribution of those who responded, it matches pretty closely with the regional demographics with regard to things like age, race, gender, and other factors. So we felt that we had good representation, similar to what we had last year. Some of the findings from that survey, one is people know who RTD is or what the organization is about. Very rarely do I see survey results at this level, but 99.7%, almost everybody surveyed was aware of RTD. We asked people how often they use RTD, and you can see only 2% use it 5 days or more a week, and that's what we expect because not everybody's a frequent user. And you can see a lot of folks are aware of it, even though they don't ever use it. They used to use it, or they use it very infrequently. You can see the majority of folks are in those top 3 blocks. But all in all, people are aware of RTD, so your brand recognition is very, very strong. Some of the real positive things that we found in this year's survey is we asked people their opinion about RTD value, whether it provides value to the greater Denver region. And this is what the results for the last 3 years. You can see 2022 is in light blue. Then only 68 or 2 out of 3 people thought it provided value to the region. It increased last year to 84, continued to increase again this year to 86. So lots of good findings there. We even asked people, does their value to them personally? Only 1 in 4 said yes in 2022. Last year, that was up to over half at 54%. Now it's nearly 2 out of 3 at 62%. So people's perceptions of value that RTD provides is definitely improving, which is great. For those people who do use RTD, it's not unusual when we do a survey like this that the number one reason for infrequent users tends to be social recreation. You can see that that's at the top of the list, but it was interesting to see that a higher portion of this year's community survey, and again, these aren't your daily riders, but among those who use it, more were using it to get to work than last year. So we saw social recreation go down a bit. We saw work go up. We also even saw things like shopping errands and medical purposes increase from last year. So those were interesting and I think positive findings. When we asked people who have used RTD in the past, why they stopped using it, top reasons people mention is this takes too long to complete the trip. Some said they didn't feel safe while waiting or riding a bus. Others thought it was a performance issue. Some indicated stops weren't located conveniently, and others had some health or safety issues. But again, majority of folks, these are people who have stopped riding so we can understand what the reasons they stopped riding. You'll notice that none of these really have to do with the way people are treated, customer services. You can see the unreliable affected some folks, but overall it wasn't a customer service issue, which I thought was a good finding for a survey like this. We then asked people what 3 features RTD could add to its current service from a list of 10 that you can see on the list to make it more appealing for people to consider using or use public transportation more often. And not real surprises, more frequent service was at the top of the list, having more routes go to places people want to go, and better on-time performance were the top 3. So again, trying to get more people to ride it, those are the things that are likely to attract people who are not riding now or are not riding frequently. Again, these aren't your current customers generally. Let's remember that we'll get those findings when we do the rail and bus surveys in October. A couple of other things that we looked at is just overall satisfaction with the job that RTD is doing. You can see stayed about the same people are a little more opinionated this year. We had more people giving positive ratings, very good and good, than we did last year, but we also had a slight increase in the poor and very poor. But all in all, things are leaning positive, and we see that on this next chart, which is the Net Promoter Score. And if you're not familiar with this, this is a survey question where we ask people, would you recommend basically your friends and other people using RTD services? And for a community value survey, since a lot of people aren't using it, a lot of people don't give 9s and 10s like absolutely, they definitely recommend. And the way this works is it's your ratings of 9 and 10 minus your ratings from 0 to 6. And for a community value survey, you see at the bottom, the national average that we have is -62. That's because a lot of folks just generally in a community who aren't really using it don't give 9s and 10s, but we have a lot of people giving 0s to 6s. And so what the real thing here is, how does the image and brand and people's assessment in Denver stack up nationally? And you can see in 2022, you're at -33, dropped a little bit last year to -44, but this year you actually are up -22. It's kind of strange to think, oh, a -22 is a good rating, but when you compare it to nationally, you're 40 points above the national average for the Net Promoter Score for a community survey like this. And so that's extremely, extremely good, and you're definitely moving in the right direction. Some of the other things that we looked at in the survey is we asked folks generally how they would rate their agreement with different questions. And the next few slides, I'm going to show you how RTD stacks up to how they were a year ago and how you're doing against the national average. And again, that national average is a true average based on a national survey that ETC Institute conducts each year. And you can see that first one about value to the region. You went up from 84 to 86. Nationally, it's only 65% of residents think that their local transit agency provides value to the region. And you can see you went up from 54 to 62 from last year this year, and that's more than double the national average, where only 29% of people typically think their transit agency locally provides value to them. Other things about providing transportation options for people with special mobility needs is up significantly, also rates well compared to the national average. And you can see finding affordable transportation options, you're 10 points above the national average there at 80 compared to 70. We got several of these slides I'll walk you through. One is how valuable RTD is with regard to improving quality of life in the Denver region. You can see that one from 66 to 75, which is a tremendous increase in 1 year. And that's now nearly 25 points above the national average at 51%. And again, when it comes to attracting or retaining more employment opportunities in the region, you can see it increased slightly, but compared to the nation, almost 20 points above the national average. And even the impact that RTD has on congestion, you can see it's much higher in Denver, with the Denver region at 78% compared to just 55% of most people and most communities thinking the transit agency actually helps reduce congestion. And then also, even when it comes to making roads safer, here in Denver, it was 73% compared to just 45% for the nation. So nearly 30-point differential on the safety issue, which is always something people are sensitive to, particularly the past couple of years. So that's one of the things you're doing much, much better in. Some of the other things that we looked at is providing access to places of employment, a little higher than it was last year, also slightly higher than the national average. Very few places do you rate below the national average, but you can see providing access to medical facilities, you can see has improved, but it still trails the national average. And then providing access to educational opportunities and places of leisure, both improved year on year, and both are significantly above the national average as well. So like kind of a redundant robot when everything's good, but that's kind of how it is this year. Slide after slide, you're seeing improvements in the way the community views RTD, even when it comes to things like achieving sustainable practices, reducing pollution and carbon footprint. Didn't change much from a year ago as upper percent, but you can see compared nationally, people view RTD much better than most other communities. And when it comes to providing safe transportation alternatives, providing access to region and adjacent cities and counties, also when it comes to supporting business, the community business, and providing opportunities to locate affordable housing. We don't have a national benchmark for these 4 items, but you can see year on year, all of these areas improved significantly compared to 2023. So again, just lots of data showing that at least from a community perspective, RTD is moving in the right direction. Last couple questions are just whether or not people have a positive perception of RTD brand. That you can see is a little better than the national average. When it comes to feeling personal secure while writing RTD services, that's one area, again, ranks a little below, but it has improved from last year from 40 to 43. And RTD adequately serves employment centers, stayed about the same, but it's nearly 10 points higher than the national average. And then one of the real interesting ones for me this year is just how much your improvement we've seen and how you compare to perceptions that your financial reporting is understandable and transparent. That's a question like, do you love paying taxes? It tends to just always rate low. Nationally, it's only 11%. So you might, when you look at your numbers, you could get numbers that are a lot higher than 25%, but you moved from 20 to 25, which is a significant improvement. And now you're more than double the national average. So again, that's going to be something you're always going to face. It's going to be hard to get a really high number in that category, but you're definitely doing a good job, even though the number may seem lower than you'd like it to be. Last couple of questions are just, I feel RTD vehicles are mechanically safe. See, that also went down slightly, one of the few areas that decreased, but it wasn't really a significant decrease from 88 to 85 is within the margin of errors. Same thing with true with RTD services are accessible to people with various disabilities, went down 2%, but that was within the margin of error. And the improvements on the other side, RTD is a diverse, equitable, inclusive community resource, up 2%, and RTD supports business, community business, up 3%. Again, most of those changes weren't statistically significant for these areas.
Excuse me, Mr. Tatum.
Sure.
It might just be me, but you're breaking up on my end, and maybe it's just that I don't have a good internet connection.
I'm not sure I can, if you need me, anybody else having?
I
I'm
can
not
hear
having any
okay.
here.
I think
Okay,
you're fine.
Okay, I apologize.
Director Caitlin, I'm sorry, I apologize. I think this is
Fine.
being recorded, hopefully, so if I am not clear in certain places.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And we also have the community's investment in transit provides value. That stayed about the same. Perceptions that RTD is trustworthy has improved, and that's also misspelled. I just noticed RTD is a good steward of public funds is also up, and RTD manages its financial resources well. Again, a lot of these questions about financial resource management and such, these aren't things that most people generally know a lot, but the direction that the ratings are going, I think, is really encouraging. So in addition to just rating a number of things and finding kind of what are the perceptions of the community, we also asked people what the top improvements or what should the RTD really focus on. And so we gave folks a list of 16 things, and the things that people really cared the most about are providing access to places of employment. That's been high in the past. Providing affordable transportation options, reducing traffic congestion, providing transportation to people with mobility needs, and providing safe transportation alternatives. Those round out the top 5. And when you say, well, what do we do with this? A lot of the times when you're talking about RTD's future, what you communicate, when you talk about investments you're making, incorporating these statements as to the rationale behind it will reinforce positive views that the community has, because this is what the community cares about. And when we actually then take a look at these against their ratings, in other words, the levels of agreement that people had, we end up getting a chart like this. And what this does is shows you from left to right. You can see the codes are to the right is a little busy. You see how important things are left to right. So you see providing access to places of employment, A, is the most important thing of all the things that were assessed. Things like O, supporting community business, was the least important. Doesn't mean it's not important, but it was rated by the least percentage of respondents as being important. As you go from the bottom to top, the things at the top, you get the highest ratings, the things at the lowest, you get the lowest ratings. And we're taking a look at what's in the bottom right quadrant. These are things that are more important that generally get lower ratings. You can see there's just one item there this year, and that's providing access to places of employment. What's really encouraging is if you throw a best fit line on this, it goes from the bottom left to the top right. And that's exactly how you want it. You want things that are less important. If you're going to give up some satisfaction, you'd want it to be in the areas that are less important and generally get better ratings than the items that are higher importance. And you can see compared to last year, you can see A was the top, or places of employment has not changed, but you can see B and C, which are providing affordable transportation options and reducing traffic congestion, they've moved more to the center. So that means that the access or providing access to place of employment is even more important relative to all the other issues this year as a thing to emphasize or put in talking points or even invest in compared to 2023. So one of the things that we found take away from the community value, but the bottom line is community value ratings are great. Your net promoter score is up significantly, and pretty much almost every area we surveyed, with the exception of just a few, increased significantly, and the areas that went down were relatively insignificant decreases. So anyway, great job this year as far as the perceptions of RTD relative to public expectations. So next thing I'm going to do is just walk through the paratransit survey results. And the survey was conducted similar way. We mail it out to paratransit customers. We then follow up with email and text. This was conducted June 19th to July 19th. And our goal was to get 400 completed surveys. We actually had 528. So we felt really good about the response again this year. You can see just the demographic characteristics of some of the people who respond. You can see we had a fifth that were African-American, almost 2/3 were white or Caucasian, 1 in 8 were Hispanics. We had slightly more folks likely to be over 55 years old, likely to be female more so than male. And you can see the incomes, over half the people reported incomes less than $25,000. 62% used Access-a-Ride, 12% used Access on Demand. And then a lot of people, one of their top reasons was getting to medical appointments. So that's just a high level of kind of the profile of what we saw for the people who were using it. On to the satisfaction results. There's some really encouraging things here, especially with Access-a-Ride, saw some real significant improvements year on year. You can see here the green basically shows the positive ratings for the very satisfied and satisfied. I want to highlight that for Access on Demand, you've got 52% giving you very satisfied or the most intense response possible. That's great brand recognition. People don't give 5s unless they feel really good about the organization. We have 40% Access-a-Ride, which is also very high. When we look at it compared to last year, you can see Access on Demand stayed about the same, but you can see Access-a-Ride improved significantly. And that's really what you see mostly here in this chart. From you look at the percentage of people who are very satisfied and satisfied, it went up 9% among Access-a-Ride users, and Access on Demand was up 1%. It was already very high. It stayed very high, but the Access-a-Ride actually was one of the biggest improvements we saw this year. So whatever's happening in that arena, certainly be working well. When it comes to the Net Promoter Score, you'll notice that Access-a-Ride was 42 in 2022. It dropped a bit last year, but overall had a significant improvement this year to 59. So you can see compared to last year, that's up 39 points and is now 17 points above where it was 2 years ago. And Access on Demand also saw significant improvement from 58 last year to 67 this year. So again, this means these are actually customers. So this tends to be a more positive rating, but this means that most of your customers are actually giving you very positive ratings, 9s and 10s, and very few people are giving you 0s through 6s when it comes to whether or not they refer the service to other people. When we asked the folks for Access-a-Ride what the 5 most important attributes or other things that they rated were to them, vehicle arriving in a scheduled window, fair price, ease of scheduling trip, travel time, and the ability to places they need to go were the top 5. You can see that there were a total of 16 items that were actually assessed. When we then looked at this on the same quadrants that I showed you before, for the community value, left to right is the importance, bottom to top is the kind of overall satisfaction. You can see that everything's kind of in the middle. You don't have anything that's really out of whack when it comes to satisfaction. Most areas are getting good ratings. You can see the lowest rating was vehicle comfort at M, but it wasn't that important to folks. And so you see the 2 things that were most important, it actually fell in the bottom line. The top 2, fair price was the second most important. You see vehicle arriving at time within the scheduled window was by far the biggest issue, but the only other item we saw in that bottom right quadrant was travel time. And again, when I put a best fit line, again, it goes from bottom, it goes lower left to top right, which means you have your resources aligned so that things that are more important are generally getting better ratings and things that are less important are generally getting lower ratings, which is a very good sign. But vehicles arriving on time within the scheduled window is definitely the one thing to probably continue to emphasize. Even though you're getting good ratings on it, you want to keep doing well. When we looked at access on demand, fair price, vehicles arriving in the scheduled window, ease of scheduling the trip, the ability to get places people need to go, and travel time round out the top 5 items. You see fair price was #1 for this group. And when we look at the same thing, the matrix that you see below, again, everything's generally rated really high. So that's why you see all these things that are almost the same. If you're looking at the y-axis, you see them all right along because most things are being rated very, very well. It's just you'll see fair price and travel time are rated just a little bit lower, and they're to the far right with regard to importance, and that's why they've been flagged as the top 2 items to potentially focus on next year. And again, we see that line, best fit line, going from bottom left to top right, where things are a lot of organizations, which you're not, they'll have the things that are least important getting rated really well, and the things that are not, that are really important in the bottom right. You'll end up having the line more than often. We don't see it go from the top left to the bottom right with a lot of other organizations. But so RTD's definitely got its resources aligned where folks I think that are most important are getting the best rating. So just to wrap things up with both areas, the community, I think especially as we come out of COVID, is becoming more and more important of an influencer on transit decisions and resources for transit. And right now you're doing a great job of building good brand recognition in the Denver area. People are more satisfied with what they see, and they see RTD providing better value than they have in previous years, which I think is a really great thing. Also saw significant improvement on your paratransit, particularly Access-a-Ride. Net promoter scores are up. The one thing that we found that was the travel time concerns for paratransit was kind of new this year. So focus on that moving forward and continue to let the public and the general community know what you're doing to help people get to and from work. That's a great soundbite. The community cares a lot about that, and it resonates really well. And I think as long as people know that RTD is out there and they believe that you're making an impact on employment, you're going to continue to get a lot of support from the community for what you're doing, even among those who don't use the service. So with that, I may pause, and I don't know if there's any questions. I'd be happy to take them if there are.
Are there any questions of directors? I see Director Guzman's hand is up, but I did want to acknowledge the fact that although not on the committee, Director Lewis had to leave at 10 o'clock, and I know he's keenly interested in the paratransit and access on demand components of this presentation. So I will probably reach out to him and find out if he has any questions or concerns. I would also like to ask Mr. Tatham, when was this survey conducted?
They were conducted the second half of June and the first half of July.
Okay, so that with regard to access on demand, that would have reflected some of the concerns raised by the community about eliminating the two-trip approach. That we heard a number of concerns raised from the public about Uber and Lyft and not being consistent in their practices with.
I don't know exactly when that took place, but the survey was June 18th to July 19th for the paratransit surveys. So
thank you.
And Madam Chair, just a point of clarification, it's not a minimum of 2 trips. It was multiple stops as it relates to on demand. So I wanted to provide that clarification for those that are listening.
I was searching for the right word. Thank you. Director Guzman.
Just really quickly, on your slide about methodology, just random sampling of houses, or were the random sampling of houses persons that would be using paratransit?
For the community, yeah, the paratransit is actually, we select customers who are in the system. So the paratransit survey, we get the full list and then we select a random sample. I think we picked 2,000 or something like that of the current customers to receive the survey. So it's a random from all of the customers who currently use you. For the community survey, it's address based. So it's a random sample of addresses in the service area, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I had that clarification. I appreciate it. Also, for the record, I did point out last year that transit to work was going to be a thing at some meeting that we had because I had heard that with the different Secretary of Transportation and brought it up at a meeting. So I'm glad to hear that that's where that is moving and something we can focus on. I appreciate all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Guzman. Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In the community survey on page 20, I did note relative to personal safety, good news and bad news. The good news is that we actually rose 3 points on our score for personal safety from the community survey of last year. So that's good progress. The bad news is we remain 10 points below the national average when addressing personal safety on our vehicles. So as I say, there's good news and bad news there, and I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you for your observations, Director Tisdale. Are there any other? Oh, Director Davidson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the work on this survey and the presentation. It's very helpful to be able to look at how we're doing and wonderful progress that the team is making at RTD. So thank you for that. I had a general question just for General Manager and CEO Johnson, just in contextualizing this. And I'm wondering if GM CEO Johnson, you wouldn't mind commenting on just your high level impressions and takeaways in terms of how we're doing, and also perhaps just a little bit on the areas of opportunity that you see that have come out of this. So I think last time we did this last year, it was helpful to hear you provide some context, how you were thinking about it and interpreting the results, what the focus of the prior year has been, which I think we can see some great progress here. Just curious to hear that again and understand some of what this says to you and perhaps most specifically those areas of opportunity and how that may tie to some of the current ongoing initiatives. So thank you, Madam Chair. And if it's okay, I'd like to hand off to General Manager CEO Johnson.
Please.
Thank you very much, Chair Davidson, for your reflections and asking for my input relative to what I see from this data. I take it in a two-pronged approach that we are laser focused here at this agency on data-driven decisions and utilizing this data for the betterment of improving the experience for those that are utilizing the system, specifically as we talk about the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, complementary paratransit services. We have been intentional engaging with that community that are qualified by way of ensuring that they're eligible because they're not able to use the fixed route service, which is a 3/4 of a mile, being rubber tire, transit bus usage, or light rail. And so with that as a backdrop, as we've gone forward, looking at the key drivers, we have honed in collectively as an organization and pinpointed areas of opportunity and reference to meet people where they are and be empathetic to their pain points. And that has proven to garner us better results. More specifically, as we talk about community value, looking at that data through the same lens of understanding individuals' pain points, looking at an understanding of how might we get individuals that may have not utilized the service previously, but get them to utilize the services. That is partnering with major employment sites, that is working in tandem when there are large scale events and going in and figuring out what might work best. It's having high level community engagement campaigns and then partnering with different entities around the city as we talk about the different services that are provided and how we fit into the community as a whole. I wasn't prepared to give you more information since you asked me on the fly, but that's high level and intentionally as we work as a team, when we have our strategic planning workshops, we're looking at the data points and then we're honing in as we look at lagging indicators versus leading indicators. And as we have honed in identifying leading indicators, what can each work group do to plug in as a contributor to the broad brush organization to move the needle in a much more positive way that will yield us returns and investment relative to actually being a value to the community at large.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Johnson.
you very much.
Appreciate you giving us your perspective as we move forward. Any other questions? Are there any other matters to discuss with this committee? Director Tisdale, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Very briefly, but I do just want to make a record here with the Performance Committee on 4 performance matters and ask if the General Manager CEO might not necessarily now, but at some point going forward, provide the committee with observations relative to these matters. The first is concerning the conclusion of the work on the downtown loop and the press release that indicated that we were not restoring service, even though the work was done. And then the email that we received from the president of ATU Local 1001, Lance Longenbaum, saying that he wasn't even consulted relative to the possibility of restoring service before the service change went into effect. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, I would like to have at some point an update on our transition plan, because we are to have that report on the transition plan by the end of September, and I assume it's underway, and that would be good. Issue number 3, regarding the Revenue Diversification Task Force. That task force, as appointed by the General Manager CEO, has suspended activities indefinitely, awaiting further developments. And I was wondering if it might be appropriate at some point to have an assessment by the task force as to what ideas it had and what it might share. And issue number 4, it was 38 days ago that we had a special board meeting in executive session regarding a personnel matter, and we had requested at that time that we be given some updates on that, and 38 days later, and we still do not have any updates on that. As I said, I do not expect that there be an opportunity to respond at this point to these, but I wanted to put them on the record so that we wouldn't forget about them, and that at some point in time, when convenient and in an appropriate forum, we hear some playback on those items. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. I see Ms. Johnson has her hand raised, and to reiterate, we don't necessarily need a response today, but when deemed appropriate, you have noted for the record that those are concerns that you're raising. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am prepared to provide responses as I have been working diligently, and this is within my purview of leading the organization on a day-to-day basis, for first and foremost relative to the service change with the near-term downtown rail reconstruction project, recognizing that we have a service change that's going to go into effect as of September 29th. That wouldn't have been permissible if we didn't adhere to the collective bargaining agreement, in which it states on page 59, whenever routes are inaugurated, or if there's going to be a change, that we basically engage with the collective bargaining unit so we can make an altercation, which we did. Hence, that was discussed at the July operations committee when we did put forward that the service change would not take place in the first week of September, but on the 29th. More specifically, as we go forward in the collective bargaining agreement on both page 59 and on page 100, it does state when the service changes will take place. So in reference to a statement that was purported that we did not engage the union, I don't know how that would be possible, or the service change would not have come to fruition at the latter part of the month. Secondly, as it relates to an update on the near-term rail reconstruction project, it is my plan to provide that at the board meeting that will take place 2 weeks from tomorrow. As it relates to the facilities fleet and transition plan, I did have an opportunity to confer with the chair just last week as we are looking at a date in November in which to have that information prior to disseminating the final report on December 13th. As relates to the revenue diversification workshop, once again, while I convene that work group, the chair of the board as well as the second vice chair have been engaged, and at this junction, recognizing that there was a matter that was referred to the ballot, we're not in a place in which we can discuss, but I'll yield that discussion for the chair. And then lastly, it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on your last item because that is something that our general counsel is leading. And so with that, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I see no other hands raised. Are there any other matters to come before this group? For this month, the Performance Committee, just as a reminder, will be meeting twice, with our next meeting scheduled for Monday, September 18th at 8:30. At that meeting, we will be revisiting our discussion on agency performance data, discussing agency performance scorecard financial success metrics, and reviewing the agency annual scorecard. While our agendas are always subject to change, I look forward to tackling these topics with our GM and CEO and committee next Monday. I would also ask that you all be prepared to discuss some of the some of the input into the 360 review if you've given it some thought over the next week. So with no other topics, I will adjourn this meeting at 10:28 Mountain Daylight Time. Thank you all for participating.